I was planning to go buy her a ring. She said, I don't want to do a break. I'd rather just break up. So today I'm just going to share with you a breakup that honestly changed my life. If I didn't go through that breakup, I wouldn't be half the man I am today. By the way, this is AV Speaks. Follow me at all platforms at AV Speaks. Look, while you're here, I need you to kick back, relax. But before you do so, make sure you hit that like button. And look, a lot of people who watch this channel are not subscribed. And so just look at that subscribe button. If you don't see that you've clicked subscribe, please do me a favor and click that subscribe for me. I really appreciate it. So in my younger years, I was a womanizer. I was with a lot of women. I found pleasure in being with a lot of women. It felt like being with a lot of women made me more masculine, made me more of a man. It was a way of bragging to other people that I was further ahead, right? I had more women, or I had the baddest or the prettiest girl. And it was a confidence boost for me, for sure. And because of that, I became addicted to it. I played football growing up. I was very competitive. And so having an opportunity to win in something, it always felt good. And being able to win with the ladies, you get a lot of social proof, not only to women, but to men as well. Men respect you when they saw that. So I was a womanizer. I dated a lot of women, and I remember it was right before my senior year of high school. I was playing football. So I'm on the football team. I'm supposed to be a captain. And my coach tells me that he sees that I'm a bit too distracted. I had too much going on with women. He didn't like that I had kind of women coming in and out from around me. And he said, son, if you want to play football at the collegiate level, you're going to have to make a decision. You cannot have all these women around. They're going to distract you for the season. He said, you either need to just be single or commit to somebody, but the way you're moving is not it. So there was a girl that I was in a bit of an entanglement with. So we were friends with benefits. I'll be completely upfront with you right now. She was in a relationship while we were friends with benefits. So it just is what it is. And that might be something that's important to remember down the line. So, but she was in a relationship. We were kids, and as children, you make mistakes. This is in no way to shame. The story I'm going to tell you is not to shame any of my exes at all. I'm telling you from my perspective. I'm also telling you what happened when I was around this particular situation. I was around 17 years old. When you're a teenager, you make a lot of bad choices. So I made bad choices, she made bad choices, and that's just what that is. But I have nothing but love and respect for her. So she was in a relationship. We were kind of messing around, behind the scenes. I was the sneaky link. And when I knew I needed a relationship, I felt like we had great rapport. I loved her character. I think she was very genuine, very authentic. And I felt that she would be a great person to be with in a committed relationship. So she ended up breaking up with the boyfriend that she had to be with me. And I ended up changing my ways. In a lot of ways, I ended up changing the way I moved. I stopped dealing with all these women. I was very faithful, extremely faithful. I cut off any woman that I was attracted to at all. That's how I am in relationships. That's one thing that my wife now really appreciates, because my wife now knew me when I was dating some previous people. And when I was in a relationship, I didn't talk to her much. And I just have a rule that if I find somebody attractive, I won't speak to them if I'm in a relationship. If I find you attractive at all, even if I know it's strictly platonic, naturally, I'm very playful. I've worked in finances, sales, and so I don't want me being playful to come off as flirting. And especially if I find you attractive, then that's a recipe for disaster. So I usually just cut off anybody that I find attractive at all. And I'll still have some female friends, but that there's a level that I won't cross. So cut off a lot of those women. Was extremely faithful, and we had a great relationship. We were like two peas in a pod, best friends. Talked about everything. She understood me. Because of me, she started going to church. She was not going to church at the time, but she knew I went to church every Sunday. I was involved in my church. I was playing the piano at my church. And so she wanted to be part of every aspect of my life, which I really appreciated. I go to a Haitian church, and she's not Haitian. She wasn't Haitian. She was Indian and Jamaican. And so she would come to church with me. She embraced the culture. Y'all be surprised. Some of the people who loved her the most spoke not a lick of English. And she would find ways to communicate with them through a lot of body language and through minimal Creole. So fantastic, young lady. And we had a really great relationship. And then one day she's invited to a wedding in Florida. I believe a family member of hers was getting married. I had just started a new job, so I couldn't go with her. I live in Georgia, so she was traveling to Florida to go to the wedding. And when she got to the wedding, she ran into an ex-boyfriend. Now, I told you she was in a relationship when I talked to her. But prior to that relationship, she was in another relationship with a man who went to jail. And when he went to jail, from my understanding, that's what broke them up. They had no relationship qualms, but when he went to jail, that's what pretty much essentially ended their relationship. So because he lived in Florida, she didn't know when he got out. She was not in touch with him, but he shows up at the wedding. And I'm sure feelings start rushing in. Don't forget, this was a forced breakup. This was not a breakup where they just mutually decided while things were normal that they wanted to end their relationship. So he wants to talk to her, and he's talking to her about how hurt he is that, she didn't stick beside him during his time of incarceration. He's letting her know that hurt him, how much he still cares about her, how much he still loves her. And she obviously felt bad that he felt that way. And throughout their conversation, she said she was comforting him. And from my understanding, they shared a kiss. Now, I talked to her the day that happened. I talked to her every day while she was in Florida. She didn't tell me anything. So she came back home. When she came back home, we picked up as if nothing happened. She didn't tell me about her encounter, didn't tell me that he was even out of jail, anything with the situation. And I thought everything was normal. I knew she went to a wedding. I knew she was with her family. I'm not, the insecure type who suspects things. I'm not the type who goes through phones, who tries to figure out. I typically just expect whoever I'm with to value me enough that, I don't have to do that. And typically I always say the day I do that, the relationship is most likely over because I've lost all trust. So she comes back, she's acting normal. I have no idea what's going on. And at this point, we were together senior year. It's now after high school. And I'm getting ready to go to Minnesota to go to college. And because I knew I was leaving the state and moving, though I've always been a Christian. My dad's a pastor. So I've always been a Christian. I've always known of God. And I've always had a love and respect for God. So I knew that if I went to Minnesota, if she were to come with me, I can't just live with her and not be married. Again, I could be sounding, somewhat contradictory because I was, doing other stuff. But that was just one of those things where I was like, I'm not going to live with somebody and not be married. What if she gets pregnant? I don't want to go down that route. So I knew I was going to Minnesota. I took the first semester off of school just to give me some time to decompress. There was a lot going on in life around that time, so I didn't want to go straight to school. But I was on a football scholarship, so I worked out with the team that I can come, in January, do spring training, and then start the following fall. So I knew if I was going to take her with me, I needed to marry her. So when she came back, things were going well. I was planning that particular week to go buy her a ring the week she came back. And while I was driving home one night, there was a song that came up on the radio. And I don't know if anybody knows this song, please let me know in the comments. But it was a song that said, "That's not his will." And they kept repeating, "That's not his will. That's not his will." And something along the lines of, God wants for you his best, but not until you submit to his will. And that song was playing, and I felt the Holy Spirit convicting me. I didn't know what that was. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I'm not the type of person who hears God audibly. Some people say they hear a voice say something to them. I've never had that experience to my recollection. But I know when God's speaking to me. I can feel, the difference when it's me in my own head versus God is speaking to me. And when God is speaking to me, I speak with 100% confidence. I don't waver. I know exactly this is what God said, and nobody could tell me anything different. I felt like God was telling me she cheated on me. It didn't make any sense. This was not the first time that she spent time away from me, and she didn't do anything strange. She's at a wedding with her family. What could that have been? But when I felt God tell me that, I knew it was true. I immediately knew it was true. There's nothing anybody can tell me to tell me otherwise. Now, don't forget, I'm the type of person, I'm not insecure, and I would always say the day I ask you a question is the day we're pretty much done. So I know I need to address this with her. If God is telling me that's not his will, I need to address this. I need to figure out what's going on, what happened, and I basically need to confirm with her that it's true. So as I'm pulled over, it was in a McDonald's parking lot. Don't know why I remember it was McDonald's. I probably was hungry. But I called her. She's like, "Hey, baby." I'm like, "Hey, I need you to be honest with me." She was like, "Yeah, what's up?" I said, "You have something to tell me. You cheated on me." She was like, "No, I didn't." "No, what are you talking about?" "No, I didn't." I said, No, you cheated on me." She was like, "No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't cheat on you. Why would you say something like that?" And I was like, I'm driving home, and I felt the Holy Spirit tell me that you cheated on me. She, to much of her respect, she always knew when God spoke to me that it was real. Again, I did not use God speaking to me as an excuse to do anything. I did not pretend like God spoke with me and he didn't speak with me, and I would use that in a manipulative way. I never accused her of cheating. But I knew. Said, "You cheated on me." That's when she stopped, and she was basically trying to say since she stopped it there and she felt bad, that's why she didn't tell me. But, I saw a question on social media the other day that said, which one is worse, being cheated on or not being told that you were cheated on? And I believe it's not being told. Being cheated on in and of itself hurts. But when you're cheated on, it could be a mistake. It could be, I got caught up in my feelings. This was going on. I don't think anybody is so strong that they can never fall. I personally don't believe that. That's why I try to set up certain parameters to not put myself in certain situations, because I don't want to find out how strong I am, right? I'd rather just avoid it. It's like if I don't want to eat sweets, I'm not going to fill my house up with Oreos. It's not going to happen, because I know, even though I don't want to eat sweets, if I see Oreos and I'm constantly around Oreos and that's all I see is Oreos and I'm hungry, I have a higher probability of getting the Oreos. So cheating is one thing. At this point, I've never been cheated on though, but that hurt. But what hurt even worse was that she didn't say anything, because her not saying anything is not a mistake. That's a decision. I'm getting ready to buy you a ring and to propose, and you don't tell me that you were unfaithful. Shouldn't I have that information? So I asked her, I said, why wouldn't you tell me? Like, oh, I didn't want to tell you because you would break up with me. It's like, yeah, but now that I found out this way, there is no chance that I will ever trust you for a relationship again. It's bad. And don't forget, y'all, I was a womanizer. I like to call myself an honest womanizer, because I told every woman that I dealt with what I wanted, what my intentions were, what I was looking to do. So I always tried to give an option to, you could either partake or not, but I always wanted to let that option just be open to them. So I never dealt with infidelity, against me. Like I said, with her, she was in a relationship. I dealt with somebody cheating on somebody else with me versus me being cheated on. And so I ended the relationship, and it was tough because, again, I thought that this would be my wife. I thought that I found my person. We had a great relationship up until that point. Fantastic relationship. But after that, I was just angry. And I said, I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. I was angry, disappointed. I didn't trust women. I just felt that, it's so easy to get played, and if I'm with anybody, they're going to play me. And I just became very angry and upset. And the worst part of the breakup was not just that, but it was the reactions from the people that I loved. Because she went to my church, and she's not Haitian. So she came to God, she started to love God, going to my church, but she's not Haitian. Most of these people, knew her because of me. And if I tell them that she cheated on me, I don't know what the fallout would be. So I didn't want to tell anybody. I kept it a secret. It's just, we broke up. Why'd y'all break up? Hey, sometimes things happen. Sometimes you grow apart, but it just didn't work out between us. And simply not telling people why we broke up actually made everybody blame me for the breakup. People blamed me left and right. They said that I was wrong. I was dead wrong. Said, what type of man are you? I was in a choir. I was playing the piano for a choir, and the choir removed me as the keyboard player because they said I was a dog, that I was playing women. And mind you, I was cheated on. I'm already going through the hurt, the pain, the embarrassment of that internally. And externally, I'm getting absolutely no comfort. Now, my ex did want people to know why we broke up because she didn't like that I was being blamed for that. Again, she had a heart of gold. She wanted to make sure people knew what happened, but I told her no because I just could not have that she loses God in the midst of it. So I didn't tell anybody. And I got blamed. And being blamed pushed me over the edge where I decided I'm going back to the streets. That was a wild time. I was out there. And again, a lot of times, when you need a lot of women, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Like, what is it that's going on internally that I'm trying to mask, that I'm trying to get past, I'm trying to distract myself from? I went to women seeking comfort, and also it was just angry. It was almost like I have to prove that women are terrible, and I wanted to be with as many women as I could possibly be with, just being wild and crazy. And that I was single for about 5 years, but for 3 years, it was really, really, really bad. I read a quote one time that says, anger is the bodyguard to pain. And that's so true. I didn't want to feel pain because I felt like pain would make me less of a man. So anger allowed me to feel something while still remaining in my masculine frame. I was just angry, trying to be with as many women as I can to show that I am the man. Like, when you cheated on me, you're tripping. Like, I'm the man. Who would do that to me? Look who I am. Look what I could do. Look who I could pull. Yeah, it was wild. And then the next 2 years, after those first 3 years, being wild, the next 2 years, I was open to dating, but I wasn't intentional. I started to open myself up to dating just because after about 3 years of a rampage, I started to meet women that I thought could potentially be a partner, could potentially be a wife, a girlfriend. And I said, let me slow down what I'm doing and see what's going on here. Now, I was open, but I wasn't intentional. And that's important to note. Just because you're open to a relationship doesn't mean you're intentional about it. And what I mean by that is I was open in the sense of I would talk to a woman and get to know her and get to know who she is, but I wasn't really asking questions to get to the nitty gritty. I wasn't really trying to figure out, what do you truly believe in life? What are your aspirations? How do you see yourself? What are you like when you're angry? Tell me more about how you grew up. How do you view your father? Do you have any siblings? What's your relationship with them? Things that really begin to paint a picture of who somebody is. When you're getting in a relationship, it's always good to do a deep dive and understand not only who that person is, but how they relate to their environment, because that'll tell you a lot about who they are. So I was not intentional at all. At all. I was just dating, but it's like I had no end goal. And, when you don't have a goal, you can't be shocked when you're walking around aimlessly. So 2 years, I kind of did that. And again, I made the decision I was going to stay single forever. During that 2 year span where I was slowing down and talking to, particular women and getting to know them, I felt that the dating pool was just not for me. I felt that the dating pool lacked what I wanted, what I needed. I felt that, society I'll be honest with you, I still kind of feel that way in some ways, but not the way I felt before, because I realized that I was the problem. But I felt that society was just degenerating so much, and there was so much negative influences out there that I couldn't find a wife. You know, I could find people who wanted a relationship, but not people who were willing to give in the relationship. And that was kind of my theme at that point in time. And so I said, I'm going to stay single. And I have my cousin, Nick. He was single as well. He was well into his 30s. I'm in my 20s. But he's well into his 30s, and he was single too. We shared sentiments that the dating pool was just terrible, and we're just going to be single. So we made no real effort to engage in the dating pool, just because we were almost jaded, knew that there was nothing in there. Again, I blame myself though, because I wasn't intentional. You mean to tell me out of billions of people that there's not one, there's not 10, there's not 100, out of billions of people, there's not 100 women that meet my criteria? If you can't find people who meet your criteria, one of two things are true. It's either the issue is you, right? Maybe your criteria doesn't make any sense. Maybe, your criteria is too high, or the issue is that what you want just doesn't want you. That's always a possibility as well. But in this case, it was me. I was the problem. I wasn't looking for a wife. Great women came by. I didn't view them as a wife. I was trying to view them through the lens of, can you be a good girlfriend? What does that mean though? Not to shame anybody who's in a relationship, but there's a reason why, if you're not married, the IRS makes you mark single. Dating is, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, I think dating is a waste of time if it's not leading to marriage. If it's not leading to marriage, you're leading it to a breakup. If it's not going to end with us committing to each other for the long haul, we're going to end in a breakup. No matter how good it is now, it's going to end in a breakup. And if you're like me and you hate, the fact that you might hurt somebody or end this and those detachments, it's pointless. So anyway, that happened. Me and Nick are both single, and Nick is super single. Nick is single on another level. So I was single, but I was going on dates. I was seeing women, talking to women, Nick was super single. I'm talking about his phone was dry as a phone could be. He had nothing going on, nobody texting him, nobody calling him. This brother's not going out on any dates whatsoever. And Nick is well into his 30s, so I was like, Nick, man, I feel you, but bro, like, man, you're not going to date anybody, So Nick was super single. And then one day he tells me, while he was on Facebook, he saw this girl and he feels like that's going to be his wife. Again, Nick was super single. Nick is not unattractive. All right. Nick had options. He had women who were checking for him. He was super single because he did not want to deal with them. That was what happened. But it was not that women were not checking for him at all. He had plenty of options, just wasn't with it. So the fact that he said that blew my mind. It's like, what do you mean? You saw her on Facebook and you feel like this is going to be your wife? He was like, yeah, I'm looking at her post, the way she says things, the way she words things. She's a woman of God. He said, I just felt that this is my wife. It's like, all right, Nick, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So he ends up talking to her on Facebook. They start talking and he wants to take her out on a date. The issue is that she lives in Florida. We live in Georgia. He goes all the way to Florida, takes a trip to Florida to take her out on a date. I've never seen him like that before. So I knew this was different. And when he came back, he was like, listen, I'm going to marry this woman. It's like the next time I go down there to Florida, I'm going down there with a ring. I said, all right, Nick, we'll see what happens. Y'all, he went down there and he proposed. He proposed to her. I was the best man at his wedding, so I was involved with the wedding. And I got a chance to meet her before the wedding because, again, it was moving pretty quickly. And when I met her, she was one of the kindest, sweetest, loving people I've ever met. I mean, she was just one of a kind. And seeing how he went from completely single to with this outstanding, amazing woman, it switched gears in my mind. I said, you know what? There are good women out there. And if I don't find them, it's maybe I'm the problem. Do I even want a wife? Am I being intentional? I started checking myself. I love to do that. I always try to hold myself accountable for myself. Whatever I'm doing, I try to hold myself accountable. I try not to blame other people for my results. What's happening to me is what can I do to fix that? So I said, I'm going to become intentional about dating. About a month later, my sister invites me out to a game night. She said her and her friends are going to a game night where they're going to go bowling, and she wanted me to come. Now, I typically would not go to an event with my sister's friends for a few reasons. First of all, I have plenty of friends. I have my own friends. So I wasn't necessarily looking to meet new friends. And also, me and my sister are very different. So I feel like our groups of friends are very different. So because we're different, I wasn't necessarily interested in going. But my cousin, Cassie, she was going to the bowling as well. And she was like, hey, I'm going to go there. I don't want to be by myself. We could at least hang out together while, my sister hangs out with her friends. So I said, all right, I'll go. So I'm hanging with my cousin and we're having a ball. We're laughing, having a good time. And a few ladies there introduced themselves to me. Now, when they introduced themselves, just being friendly, meeting people, talking to some of them. My sister would come up and whisper to me like, hey, they're single, to let me know. But I wasn't necessarily interested in anybody that I saw there that night. Don't forget, I'm in the mindset where I'm ready for something serious, but I still, I still wanted to choose something that I would like. I wasn't necessarily interested in them, nothing against them, but I just didn't find interest in that. But then my cousin Cassie, she points out one particular lady there and she says, Alex, I don't know why, but I keep having this feeling that you're supposed to talk to her. My cousin is not the type of person to be extra, hey, God told me this, God told me that. She's not that type of person. So this is not something that she's done before. So when she did, it really stood out to me. It was like, okay, you think I should talk to her? She's like, yeah. She's like, I feel like God wants you to talk to her. I said, okay. So I go up and I talk to the lady. I'm talking to her, getting to know her, putting on the charm. And I end up getting her number. So after I take her number down, I invite her out on a date. We start talking. I invite her out on a date. We had a great time. I think we shot pool, went to dinner, a lot of laughs, just great time all together. And the date went so well. And at the end of the night, we were just talking outside. And she was telling me that she wrote a letter to God about the type of husband that she wants, and she wanted to show me that letter. Now, it was on her phone, and the date, usually on the Notes app, it was on the Notes app on the iPhone, and on the Notes app, if you don't edit it, it typically has a date of when the note was last modified. And so I saw the date on it, and it was months before she met me. So I knew this predated me. So I take a look at the letter of what she asked God for in there. And she asked God for a man that's over 6 feet tall. I'm over 6 feet tall. She asked for a man that's a musician. I'm a musician. I play 4 instruments. She asked for a man that loves God. I love God. Love Jesus. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. Can I get an amen? And she wanted somebody who loves football. And I played football my whole life. So I need you to understand, at this stage, earlier in that year, my cousin Nick gets married, and I feel a pull to be intentional about finding a wife. My cousin Cassie tells me that she believes I'm supposed to talk to this lady, this woman. And this woman has a note describing the future husband that she wants God to give her. And that note is describing me. I'm standing in front of her. I'm literally like, all right, this is it. This is what I asked, I asked God for. This is everything just connected. I had to go to that wedding earlier in the year so that I could be primed, so that I can meet her and actually not waste her time and take it seriously. And I made her my girlfriend. Said, okay, let's be together. And I told her something that's very important. I told her, I will not be dating you for more than a year. That was really big for me because in my time, in that 5-year span where I was single, there were some women who felt like I wasted their time. I didn't feel like I did because I felt like I was always honest about my intentions. I didn't say I wanted something serious if I didn't. And if I did say I was thinking of something serious, I actually meant it. Something stopped me along the way. Maybe I found something out, but I didn't feel like I wasted anybody's time. But still, there were people who felt like I wasted their time. And that was valid because I realized I wasn't intentional about it. And the fact that I was not intentional, I probably did. So I was like, I'm not going to do that to anybody else. Listen, we're not going to be together for more than a year, meaning that if we get to a year, if we actually successfully get to a year, by the time we get to a year, you will be engaged. And that pretty much put pressure on me as well to make sure that I'm intentional. Throughout that year, I have enough time to gather all the information I need, all the intel I need to experience her in a way where I can make a wise decision if we should be together or not. That's very important for you to remember because that's going to come up later on. So she said, okay. She loved how intentional I was going to be, and the relationship was now official. It was going well. In the relationship, we were always laughing. Again, she loved the Lord. She was heavily involved in her church, which I really appreciated. She was involved in small groups surrounded by Christian women, and I really appreciated that about her. I met her family, and I liked who they were. Even her younger brother, we still kind of keep in touch sometimes. Really liked him, but everything was going well, and it just seemed like a match made in heaven until one day. I ended up having knee surgery. I was in a car accident earlier that year and tore my right meniscus in my knee. And so after dealing with it for months, kind of dealing with the pain, my orthopedic decided that it made more sense for me to have surgery to try to repair my knee. So it was my first surgery. I've never had surgery before. I was pretty nervous about being put to sleep, but everything went well. So after the surgery, a lot of friends end up coming to come see me. And one thing I'm very grateful for is I do have a lot of solid relationships in my life. Extremely grateful. And everybody who came by, they would bring food, gifts. Some people brought flowers. Some brought teddy bears. But everybody came bearing gifts. I remember I had to tell people to stop bringing food because it was impossible for me to eat all the food that was there. It was so much food there. And I had to start sharing food with other guests. Like, you come to see me and you leave with food, because I did not want the food to expire. But it was just so much love, admiration, oh my gosh, care packages left and right. I was getting care packages all day, every day. And everybody who showed up always brought something with them. Now, my ex, she did not show up until that weekend. So I had surgery on that Monday, and I didn't see her until that Saturday. And when she showed up on that Saturday, she showed up completely empty-handed. So she brought nothing at all. That was weird to me because the way I was raised, you don't show up when somebody has a major event in their life, positive or negative, right? Wedding, a funeral, surgery, recent engagement, a birthday, any type of major event. You'd never show up empty-handed. You always bring something, right? Just to show appreciation for the moment that you're in. And so she came empty-handed, and then she came, that was on Monday, and she came all the way on Saturday. And so I felt some type of way about it. Now, I was not overly upset because in my mind, maybe she just wasn't raised to do that. Like, maybe she just didn't know that was how, things are normally done. At least the way I was raised, that was normal. And my friends, they might have known about it because, think about it, you choose friends who are similar to you. And so if my friends knew, to bring something, then, maybe she just didn't know. And maybe this was a moment where I can kind of tell her, hey, this is the way I operate. Because if you're going to be my wife and we go to an event where somebody had a surgery, or you go to see somebody who just had a surgery, even if I'm not there, you're still my wife. You represent me, right? So even if it's your friend who had a surgery and you show up, our family should show up with some type of gift, something to honor that moment. So I decided I'm going to talk to her about it. And again, I was not upset. I really just thought she probably didn't know that was an expectation of mine. So I wanted to communicate that clearly. So I brought it up to her. And she said that I was asking for wife duties. Her, as a girlfriend, should not be bringing me any food, any gifts, or anything like that. That was difficult for a few reasons. And again, as I explain this, not to demonize her at all, I'm telling you everything from my perspective. Her perspective could be completely different. I'm telling you what actually happened and then my interpretation of it. But keep in mind, my interpretation could be wrong. We all think the best of ourselves, right? So maybe I misstepped somewhere in there as well. So just keep that in mind as I explain this, because she was a good person. We got into a relationship and I have no animosity, hatred towards her. But yeah, she told me that was the duty of a wife. Now, a couple of things there. The first thing I believe is, in a relationship, I believe the minimum that you should do is what a good friend would do. So my expectations should be that of a good friend at the minimum, right? A good friend would still show up as soon as they could, and they would show up bearing, some type of gift, something. And if they don't come with anything, they would say, hey, I couldn't bring anything because blah, blah, blah. That's just what I expect from my good friends, because that's what I am too. That's what I do in my relationships. So the fact that she didn't think that, I was like, okay, so this is not acting as a good friend. And I understand her desire to protect herself. Like she wants to protect her heart. I get it. You don't want to be giving yourself up and doing all of this for a man who's not going to be with you. I do get that, but her not coming all those days bothered me because there was nothing special in her calendar happening. She was getting off of work somewhere around 5 p.m. And so we live 30 minutes away from each other. So waiting until the weekend to me was another thing that I felt like a good friend would not do. So I didn't appreciate that. And the last thing that really bothered me was that she was struggling with her rent. And she was kind of in between jobs. She had just started working another job, but she was out of work at one point in time. And I helped her stay afloat. I helped her stay afloat by helping with rent. And I felt like that was not my duty as a boyfriend. I tell men this all the time, do not be paying bills for somebody who's not your wife. I don't think that's wise at all, at all. I do think, as a boyfriend, my duty was to pay for dates. We go out, we hang out, I'll pay for dates. And if it's your birthday, I'll get you a gift, But outside of that, I didn't think my duty was to pay. A boyfriend's duty is to pay your rent, to help you stay afloat. And if you felt that simply bringing a plate of food was something a wife would do, and you can't do that, you should not accept thousands of dollars from me. It's a give and take. Life is about reciprocity. And there's some things you don't accept unless you're willing to reciprocate. That's how I believe. If I know I don't want to reciprocate something, I'm not going to accept it from you. I'm not, because I don't want to set a bad precedent. I'd rather say, hey, I'm good. No, I'm all right. If I'm not going to show up to you, if I don't want to invite you to my parties, I'm also not going to show up to yours, right? I'm not, imagine, every year for your birthday, you invite somebody and they show up, to your parties. And then when they have a birthday party, they don't invite you because they say, hey, we're not that close. What do you mean we're not that close? You're in my intimate circle every time I have an event. Like, what do you mean, right? So there's reciprocity there. And the fact that I felt like the reciprocity was broken intentionally. It wasn't that you just didn't know, because if you didn't know, that's okay. Not all of us were raised the same, with the same morals, the same standards. So, if you didn't know that, that's fine. I can show you, how I want my family to operate as the man of my family, as the leader of my household. This is something that's going to be part of my household. We will be the type of people who reciprocate. And her saying that really, really bothered me, because it began to show a pattern of, and once it's like when one bad thing happens, it kind of, the light bulb goes off and you start to reanalyze other things that happened. And I started to realize that there were other behaviors that showed that, and again, this is my interpretation, Not saying this is exactly what it is, but I felt as if she was only concerned with what she can get out of the relationship and thought that I should not be concerned at all with my side. She used to always say happy wife, happy life, but can we say happy spouse, happy house? This has to be a two-way street. If it's only one way, that becomes abuse. That becomes abuse. Reciprocity is part of the laws of life. You have to reciprocate. So that started to change my perspective. I started to feel like, she wasn't kind to people. Again, that was just my perspective. I felt that she wasn't kind because people would tell me that they met her and they didn't feel like she was kind to them. And being kind to people was a really big thing to me because, in church, I'll preach. In work, I am a speaker as well. So I'll most people who see me, you normally see me on a stage somewhere discussing something. I teach finances. I'll teach the Bible, right? I teach on relationships. So I'm always big on people not feeling like I'm out of touch with them. And I don't want people to pedestalize me because they saw me on a stage. And so it's important to me that I'm kind and warm. And if somebody approaches me that they don't feel belittled, like they approached, some big God, right? I am just like you. And the only difference is maybe a couple of decisions. That's the only difference. And so when I heard that she wasn't kind to people, that really did start to bother me. And then, of course, not feeling like she cared about my concerns. And so after a while of noticing that, it was about 9 months. So we're 9 months into the relationship around this point. And remember I told you, I said if we get to a year and we are still together, I'm going to be proposing. We're going to get married. And I'm so grateful for that time constraint because it forced me to now really analyze the situation. What is the relationship like? And so I brought it up to her. I said, hey, these are some of the concerns that I've noticed, and these are some of the things that I've seen going on. Now, at this point in time, she had things that she wanted me to change as well. She asked me to make certain changes, and I tried my best to make them. Anything that she would ask me to do, I typically would not fight back. I would say, hey, that's valid. Your feelings are valid. I remember in social media at that particular point, there was a big thing about making sure everybody knows their feelings are valid. And I probably abused that word, valid. Your feelings are valid. Everything you say are valid, right? And I was really big on let me make sure that I affirm you and then work on it. So every time she had a complaint, I would always say, hey, that's valid, that's valid, that's valid. And I did not bring up many of my concerns, but as we're getting to the 9-month mark, I'm like, man, this is not going the way it should. I bring it up to her and I say, hey, I've been noticing that, this person said that they didn't feel that you were kind to them. And I also have some concerns because, the wife duty thing, it makes me wonder, what that would look like in a marriage, because your personality, those characteristics, if they're there, they will be there, throughout our marriage. And she told me, this is who I am. You can either take it or leave it. I don't like ultimatums. I do not like ultimatums at all. if you give me an ultimatum, I'm most likely going to take the negative. And I feel that ultimatums are manipulative. I feel like it's like a power play, right? That you feel like you're powerful, and that's why you're throwing this ultimatum. And I'm always the type to test it. Like you want to say either that or leave it, like take it or leave it. Then what if I leave it then? Now what? Because most people who give you ultimatums, they assume you're going to take it. They assume that's your only option is to take it. No, it's not my only option. I can leave it too. And that was probably the first time that I really was upset, that I really got upset in that relationship. I felt that she said that because she knew that I would marry her. Because all of our story of how we got together, she knew I would marry her. And so she knew if she threw out there, take it or leave it, that I would not leave it. I would just take it because I believe this is my wife and I want to please God. And so I'm just going to take it. And that really made me upset. That was really the beginning of the end. So at that point in time, when that happened, I start praying. I start asking God, what's going on? Because if I'm in a relationship with somebody who does not want to hear anything I have to say, everything I say is too much, this is going to be a very toxic relationship. And this will either end in a divorce or, it's not going to end well. I know it's not going to end well. So God, I want to honor marriage. And I was just praying about it, but not hearing anything back from God. And then one day we were invited to a friend's wedding. And like I told you, after that particular conversation, I was no longer pleasant. Not saying that I was mean all the time. I didn't yell or call people out of their names. No, that's not who I am. But I was not as gentle. If I had an issue, I would try not to bring it up and ask myself, should I even bring it up? Is she the issue or am I the issue? I would take everything on for myself and work on myself to be better and to be a better man. And I would assume almost everything she did was perfect. It was fine. And if there's an issue, it has to be me. And I'll tell you, especially with social media could really have a man thinking that, everything is your fault as the man, right? If the woman is not, if the woman is mean, it's your fault. You didn't create the atmosphere. If just everything was your fault. And social media was doubling down that it was my fault. So I was very self-conscious and wanting to be as gentle as I could be. But at that point, I was like, no, this is not right. This is not normal. I was in a relationship before, like my previous ex who cheated. We almost never got into an argument, ever. And I went from that to arguing all the time, right? It was just miserable. So I wasn't pleasant, and I'll own that. At that point in time, I was not trying to sugarcoat anything I thought anymore. If you did something wrong, I'm just gonna say straight up, like, hey, what are you doing? Like, why? What? That girl just said hi to you. Like, why you just ignored her, or why you act like that? Why'd you say that? Like, no, that's not cool. You represent me. Like, don't do that. The tone changed, and I take accountability for that. So this particular week, we're invited to the wedding. That entire week, we are fighting, arguing, same old, right? I don't feel respected. I don't feel like you're taking into account anything I want. You want all this to be about you. And that's all you want in a relationship, is for somebody to just lift you up, but you do nothing in return. You know, it was around that. And again, this is all my perspective. So we're supposed to go to a wedding that week. So the plan was that I would pick her up in the morning and, we go to the wedding together. It was her friend's wedding. So I was the plus one. I was only invited because of her. So this is her friend's wedding, but I'm the plus one. And we had already planned on going. That morning I call her, just as my routine was, and she didn't pick up the phone. Kept calling, no response. Texting her, hey, are you okay? No response. Later that evening, she reaches back out. By this time, the wedding is over. She reaches back out to me. I was like, hey, where have you been? She said, yeah, I went to the wedding. I just didn't pick up because I didn't want to go with you. That to me was what the straw that broke the camel's back. Because, you stood me up. I was ready to go to the wedding. I canceled everything I had going on for that day to go to the wedding with you. And because we're arguing, you decide to just ignore me and then go to the wedding without me. And so I was really upset. And I said, okay, you know what? And by the time this wedding happens, we're at the 10-month mark. So don't forget, y'all, there's that 1 year mark that's that's approaching. And I know if I cross that 1 year mark, I promised an engagement. So I'm like, I need to figure this out. I knew I did not want this. Like, I knew this is not what I want. This is not the relationship that I want. But God still hasn't given me any info on what to do with this. How am I supposed to deal with this? Am I supposed to have faith that this is going to change and endure? Am I supposed to just end this thing because it feels like if we stick in this thing, it's not going to work? I might as well end this thing now because it's better to end a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship than to end in a divorce. So I told her, hey, let's take a break for 2 weeks. Now, we could still be together, but, I want some time for us both to pray and really see if what we're doing is right. Again, that 1 year mark, I'm trying to tell y'all, these deadlines, y'all should put, hey, if my recommendation, not telling everybody what to do, but my recommendation is put deadlines on dating. Always put deadlines on dating. Right? Because when you put a deadline on dating, it forces you to be intentional with the other person's time. It forces you not to waste their time. Right? Because I knew that I said I will not be with you for more than a year without proposing. By the time we got close to a year, I'm just like, if I still don't see how we can get married, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to have you here for 10 years of your life wasting your time. So I said, okay. We need this break. And she said, I don't want to do a break. I'd rather just break up. I got to tell you, I can't even lie. I was so relieved. I was so relieved. Man, like, I'm even on the phone, I'm just like, I was so happy. It's like, I did not want this, and I did not want to end it because I didn't want, like, for lack of better words, the blood on my hands, right? I didn't want to be the one. I was like, okay, you ended this. Awesome. And so I still prayed for those 2 weeks, and God finally responded with the green light to end the relationship. Now, throughout those weeks afterwards, she did reach back out to me. She was actually upset with me because she said that I should have went after her when she broke up with me, that, that's what I was supposed to do, is go after her and, basically tell her, like, I want this relationship. But I told her, I'm done with the manipulation. If you want to leave, you wanted to leave. That's one thing I always tell people. If somebody wants to leave, you let them go. Don't be stuck trying to hold on to somebody who is trying to escape. Because what makes you want them around is not who they're going to be if they don't want to be there. Right? That sweet, kind, whatever person that you thought you had, when they don't want to be there, they're not that anymore. They're not kind. They're not sweet. They're not, there starts to be a resentment. So why are you holding on to them? Right? If you want to leave, you can go. And when you go, if you walk away from me, I close the door. I lock it. You don't get to come back either. All right? I don't want to hear nothing about, what you expected for me to do. I'm not going to be manipulated into chasing you while you run all around. Right? So no, I said no. I did not owe you that. I don't owe you that. And I don't want to be with you. Like I told you, I was really happy that it was over. I'm not going to lie. And I don't say that to belittle the relationship or anything like that, or belittle her in any way. Like I said, I think she was a good person. Sometimes a relationship could bring out the worst in you. Sometimes you bring out the worst in somebody. Sometimes people bring out the worst in you. And so I don't think she's a terrible person at all, but I was very happy that relationship was over. I was extremely happy that relationship was over. It just felt like, because the fear of what my future could look like, it was eating away at me. And, it just felt like a burden just kind of got off of me. But though I didn't want to be with her, the breakup still hurt. And I started to remember, the last time I felt hurt, what I did, what I became. I didn't want to be with her. I was very happy we weren't together, but there was still a loss. Like, I imagined a future with her, and that's now gone. Everything I thought we were going to do, everything I thought we were building, that's now gone. I introduced her to my family, and those were real relationships, and I had real relationships with her family and her friends and my friends. And those were real relationships that I now have to go back to them and say, hey, we're not together anymore. And what does that do? I also had some PTSD of everybody blaming me for the breakup, regardless if they know what happened, right? I didn't want to be villainized again. So it was tough, right? I didn't want to go back to womanizing and dating all these women. No, I'm in a space where I want a wife. And if I don't deal with this grief properly, I'm going to be stuck in my previous patterns. So I was able to get through that grief. And honestly, it only took me about a month. The reason why I believe it happened so quickly, because mind you, I could have been angrier than I was with the cheating. The cheating was bad, but this one felt worse because, again, I was in a dilemma where I thought this was my wife. Everything told me this was my wife. And that dilemma was heavy. How do I leave that? Right? So even with my ex, when me and my ex broke up, even though it was a breakup because of infidelity, we were still close. We were still friends. I still appreciated her as a person. I still do appreciate her as a person. I think she was a good person. I just knew that was not something I was interested in terms of a romantic relationship. But I was angrier in this situation because, I felt completely bamboozled, that felt completely bamboozled. I was angry and it could have taken me longer. It could have reinforced some of those negative thoughts that led me to believe that women were a certain way. That's what we do sometimes when we deal with something bad. We try to pin that on an entire gender, but that's just not true. Not true. Not all women are cheaters. Not all women are selfish. I would even venture to say it's not most women. There's just some. Like with men, where they say all men are dogs and all men are this. No, it's just some. If it's all in your experience, then that says more about you than it does about the people. Because if every man you date is a dog and a player and he's disrespectful and he doesn't care about you, then that means you have a type. All that means is you have a type. If every woman you're with is a cheater, they're mean, they're rude, they're this, that means you have a type. You have a type, bro. Like, you can't pin that on another gender. And I was so tempted to pin these negative stereotypes on women. But it was different this time because I actually took the steps that I needed to take. And I'll tell you what that was. If you don't grieve, you won't heal. I was afraid of grief because I felt that grief would derail me from what I was trying to do. I felt that grief would distract me. I didn't see the value of grief. I didn't see the value of grieving a situation because I have stuff to do. I have to keep moving. But the truth is, not grieving, you can't avoid grief. You can't. So when you could only delay it. So when you don't grieve, you're kind of delaying that process. And the longer you delay it, the longer it's going to take. It took me 5 years. 5 years. 5 years. 5 years of hurting people's feelings, and 5 years of playing games. And I thought that I thought that the only person I was hurting was myself, but I hurt other people because I didn't grieve. And if I had just taken the time to grieve, when I say grieve, y'all, I want you to understand, grieving is, just being with those feelings. It's not, you don't have to necessarily cry. I didn't cry. I didn't shed a tear. But instead of distracting myself, because I would distract myself with women, money, parties. Instead of distracting myself, I dealt with it. I sat there and I felt those feelings and I dealt with what that felt like. I didn't run from it at all. I also spoke to a group of men and found counsel in men. That's one thing I'll tell every man who's listening. If you don't have a group of brothers that you can talk to, you are doing yourself a huge disservice. Listen, man, we all deal with stuff. We all deal with heartache, rejection, heartbreak. We all deal with that. And a lot of times as men, we want to keep trucking along. And I get it because, sometimes if you stop, it could ruin it for other people. All right. I don't have the opportunity to just stop, even if I'm tired. Right. I have to keep going. It feels like that sometimes. But that's why you need other men around. When you don't have other men around, you put the burden on women. Right? You're dating somebody and now you want to dump everything you've ever felt to her. And, I say this respectfully because, again, I have a wife and I do tell my wife a lot of what I'm going through, but that's her role is not to be your therapist. If I hear a noise in the middle of the night, I don't get to turn to my wife and say, baby, I'm scared. I don't get to say that. I have to get up and walk and go find out what's going on. I can't expect my wife to suddenly be able to to take in all of my fears and view me as a protector at the same time, I think that's not fair. And if she is able to do that, kudos to her. But if I didn't have a group of guys that I can talk to that just understood where I was coming from, this is why I'm recording this video, because men, we don't talk about these things, but we deal with them. When we love hard. So when it doesn't work out, it's bad. So I'm talking about it so that hopefully you can glean something and pick something up. But if you don't have a group of brothers, man, please find some, talk to some. Sometimes you have them, but you're just not leaning on them for that support, right? But talk to somebody and know that. But you have to grieve. You have to grieve. You have to surround yourself with people who can help you process the situation, And if I did not go through that process, I would have went right back to the streets. I really would have. I would have went right back to the streets, right back to what I was doing, trying my best to manage, my thoughts, my pain, what I was dealing with. But I'm so glad I didn't. So happy I didn't do that. Because after that relationship, that's what led me to my wife. And that's a story in and of itself. Maybe I should do that story time next, because that situation it's pretty interesting the way that ended up working out. I appreciate you. If you're still here now, I appreciate you for being here. I want you to know I wish you nothing but good things. Whatever it is that you're going through, whatever it is that you're dealing with, I want you to know that you are not alone. You can do this. If you are in a relationship and you're considering a breakup, listen, if you know it's not going to end in marriage, stop wasting time. If you know, now if it could possibly end in marriage, then cool. But if you don't think it's going to end in marriage, if you know it's not going to end in marriage, stop wasting time. You're wasting your time and you're wasting the other person's time. Trust me, you don't want to be that person who wastes people's time. 10 years later, that person is, you took 10 years of their life and you knew you weren't going to marry them from year one. To me, that's wrong. Right? So if you're on the cusp and you don't know for sure what you're going to do, just end it. Don't waste that person's time. And if you have dealt with a breakup and, you're in a season of grief now, I want you to know the sun comes out. Better is on the horizon. All right? You just don't give up. You can't predict the future. Don't think you can. Just because this relationship was amazing doesn't mean that you can't have another amazing relationship. Just because that relationship was toxic doesn't mean you can't have another relationship that'll be amazing. It doesn't mean that you can't predict the future. You are not God. You're not God. So don't put that in your mind that you can suddenly predict what's coming. But I'm telling you, if you do the work, keep your faith, what's coming is better than what's left. I promise you. Anyways, your boy AV Speaks signing out. Please go ahead, like the video. Please subscribe. Leave me a comment. Let me know how you enjoyed this story time. And if you enjoyed it, I have a lot of stories. I have a lot of stories that I could share that I've picked up some wisdom from over the years. And please share this with somebody. You don't know who's going through anything. Some people are going through breakups. Some people are going through a negative season. And maybe this could be what helps pick them up. Anyway, love y'all. Appreciate y'all for rocking with me. And you have a good one.